Welcome to Diligent Canine. In this video, I'm going to talk about teaching a focused heel or an attention heel, competition heel. Either way, we're talking about your dog walking at your left side while looking up at you. I'm actually going to break this video down into a series of shorter videos to address the different parts of heeling. And for the first part, we need to teach the dog to get into the position we want before we move in that position. What I mean is we need to teach our dog to come to our left side, to look up at us, and we need to be able to do that from a variety of different positions before we expect the dog to stay at the left side, stay looking up at us while we continue to move, be that walking forward, walking backwards, turning, stopping, running, walking slow, all those different things that you may want your dog to remain at an attention heel throughout. So the first game we can play with our dog is how to find the left leg. First, we need to teach them, luring is a good way to do that, to teach them to come to that position. Then we need to play a game with them. We don't need to play a game with them, but we can play a game with them to make it fun for them to find my left leg, not just while I'm standing square, but maybe while my left leg is forward, backward or forward, or when I call the dog from the right to come to the left, when I call the dog from the front to come to the left, all those different sort of entries to that position. So the first part of teaching your dog to heel is how to find the left leg. Puss! Yes. That is an example of what this behavior looks like when we call the dog to positions. You can see I have my dog out in front of me, calling him to my left, and he's watching me, ready to go. So let's go over how to teach that. You can do it through luring, and as I talked about before, that's using a bit of food to gesture and guide the dog to lure them through the behavior that you want them to perform. So you're guiding them, you're using the food in front of their nose to guide them and lure them how you want their body to move through space. And then of course, marking with a clicker or a verbal marker and releasing or giving them the reward. So, in the case of the dog, that might look like this. Place. Okay. And, seats. Good. Now, I want to make a big sweeping gesture initially, and my body mechanics are important during this as well. I don't want the dog to necessarily come out super wide and back into my body. I want him to stay pretty close to me, and this is how you get a little quicker flip on the dog rather than a lazy sort of wide swing of their butt. When the dog is really excited, this is how you get that hop into position. So when I lure the dog, I'm going to take a step back with my left leg as well. So I'll guide the dog and make a looping gesture with my hand and bring my leg up and my hip up as well. From a different angle, that will look like I'll have food in my left hand. I'll give the command and lure the dog as I step back with my left leg. Move a little, step back with my left leg and make the gesture. And then as my hand comes forward, my leg will come forward as well. And I will lift my hand to encourage the dog to sit. So the dog is following from the front, following my left hip, coming back forward, and then sitting at the end. And it's important to reward the dog where you want their focus to be. So for this case, it's right over my left hip then. It's not out in front of me, it's not out to the side, it's right here where I want the dog to be looking. And the reason that is important is because when you do this, after hundreds and hundreds of repetitions, the dog will anticipate that reward placement, and his body and his behavior will creep towards where he or she thinks that reward is going to be. So if I'm always rewarding wide out here, I'm going to have problems with my dog coming into the heel, but looking out wide to the left then. So that might be a topic for later video, but for now, let's go over the luring and see what that looks like with the dog. So when I give the command, first, I'm stepping back, bring him into position, and raising my hand. Yes. Now I've got pretty strict criteria. You can see Dean made a little bit of an adjustment then to bring his rear a little closer. It was flanged out to the left a little bit. He's self-corrected. When you're starting out, your criteria needs to be very simple. So as your dog performs better and better and becomes more accurate, you can ask a little more and a little more of them. So let's look at that again. Place. Again, with the lure in my left hand, I'm going to give my command. First, step back, bring the dog in. Yes. Mark and reward. Again. Whoa. First, big swoop in my left hand, bring it up. Yes. Cuts. I'm standing intentionally in front of a wall because I found that to be really helpful as well. I mentioned that for my dog, his butt swings a little wide sometimes when he comes into position, and a wall is a really helpful way to teach that. It's also really helpful when we start moving from this position because, obviously the wall physically stops the dog from, it takes away the option from the dog to move that direction. So this becomes helpful when we stand with a space, maybe about an arm's length away from the wall, and we call the dog into position between our body and the wall. Again, we can use luring for this, so let's take a look at that. Place. Seats. Foot. Yes. So you can see the wall takes away some of those options for the dog to sit wide or to move that direction. Place. Good. And after I've stood maybe an arm's length away, maybe I can move a little closer to an elbow length. Right? So I've got my elbow against the wall here. That's about how far away I am. And I'm going to try to lure the dog through this space. First. Yes. Place. One more time, I'll try to get a little closer still. So maybe only about, maybe about 1.5 feet. So, first. Yes. And you can't quite see it on camera, but I've got a crate behind me as well. Not on purpose, but I happened to just notice that kept the dog's body pretty close behind me as well. Not a bad thing, but it's the same principle as the wall, using your physical environment to control the dog's space. Now let's get into the fun part, and that is adding some variety to this training. So what I mentioned in the introduction is that you can call your dog to your left leg. That's the name of the game, is find the left leg. So that is find my left leg, whether I'm standing square, the left foot is forward, left foot is backwards, whether I call you to the left leg from in front of me, behind me, to the right, to the left, when I'm walking forward, all those different things are really fun ways to start to develop this behavior in your dog and really make sure that they understand what it is you're asking of them. So I've given some examples, calling my dog from the front, from behind. I do want to mention that you can use luring for all of these things. So just like any luring behavior, eventually you will start to fade the lure. That is where we initially made very grandiose, obvious gestures. Eventually those gestures will become more and more subtle until they're non-existent, and we get rid of the luring food as well. So the gesture may become more and more subtle, or we still gesture, but we don't have food in our hand. We're sort of trying to trick the dog. We're just making the same grandiose gesture without food in our hand, and the gesture becomes more and more subtle. But of course, after we gesture, we're still marking and rewarding. So you can play with those sort of luring systems. Again, That's sort of the principle of luring, is that your luring gesture becomes more and more subtle until eventually you give the verbal command, the dog anticipates the lure, and moves into position then. So let's look at some of those find the left leg games. First, yes. Okay. I can lure this the same way, just as I mentioned. Place, seats. Good. First. Yes. All right. From the other side. Good. First. Yes. Behind. Seats. First. Yes. Like that. First. Yes. Live. The foot forward. First. Yes. Different angle on that place. Live. Like back. First. Yes. Again from that angle. Good. Whoa, back. Dive. This time the foot forward. Push. Oh. We have practiced a leg leap, as you can tell. So he's got a little confused there. Six. Dive. Push. Push. Oh, confused again. Push. Yes, there we go. Okay, so that was forwards, backwards, left, right, leg in front, leg in back. If you really want to play around, you can move your body into some different spaces as well. Place. Something I like to do is kneeling. That could be a kind of fun way to mix this up. Push. All right. And it's the same thing instead of my hip. I'm really rewarding the dog in my armpit area, so he's still looking at my face. Okay. And just for future reference, you can practice your lured heels this way as well. And maybe I will talk about reward placement then. Some people use hot dogs and they as their rewards, and they'll put them in their own mouth and spit them out. But holding the food in my teeth, obviously the dog is going to look towards the food, towards where he's anticipating the reward to come from. So right now I'm using kibble. I'm not thrilled about putting that in my own mouth, but if I were using cheese or hot dogs or something like that, that's very applicable. What I have done with kibble though is when I really want the dog, when I'm really practicing attention or focus, that is a separate component of healing, or it's a component used in healing, but it's something that I teach and train separate to develop those skills in isolation. But I will lure the dog into position and I will move the reward towards my chin so that I don't have to look down at the dog to make sure that they're looking at me. I know they're going to focus on the reward, so I can look forward in a casual position and hold the reward under or on my chin. It's the same principle as holding a hot dog or something, a piece of a hot dog in your mouth. I'm holding the kibble at my chin, so when I eventually give my yes mark, the reward comes directly from my chin. So it's using those same principles that could get you into trouble if you're rewarding way out in front. Don't be surprised if your dog creeps forward or if they hang wide because you're always rewarding out to the side. If I notice those things happen, I'm going to start rewarding from my own chin. So just to recap the whole process then, you're luring wide with food. Eventually the food goes away. Then the gesture becomes more subtle. Then we're just giving our verbal command. The dog moves into position. And if you want to go back to luring just for the finish, you've got your food in hand. dog at your side, move the food to your chin. Using a front-facing camera on your cell phone or a mirror is really good because I can see my own position and I can see if my dog is looking at me or not without having to look down at them. And of course, I wait for them to look at me. I can see that Dean is looking at me now, but he's not in a heel, so I'll call him to that. Puss! He's watching me, looking up at my chin still. Yes. And that's how we play the game of Find the Left Leg, which is of course the foundation of teaching an attention heel. Thanks for watching and for your support of military and working dogs.